The Daily Signal is the multimedia news organization of the Heritage Foundation.
It's a place where busy Americans can come, find out what the important issues of the day are,
To cut through the clutter and communicate directly to the American people.
and be exposed to conservative policy solutions. The American people are a lot smarter than the news gives them credit for. They know the difference between spin and news.
We work with 100 policy experts here at the Heritage Foundation who cover a range of issues.
What makes the Daily Signal unique is our commitment to delivering the news in a fair, accurate, and trustworthy manner.
Since the Daily Signal began, we have gone where the action is. That meant sending a team to the U.S.-Mexico border.
Reporting from Encina, Texas, this is Josh Siegel with the Daily Signal.
It meant going to the steps of the Supreme Court as decisions were being handed down.
Right now, we're here at the Supreme Court, where it's just decided whether...
And we've worked with veteran investigative reporter Cheryl Atkinson.
I have far more editorial freedom contributing the stories that I do to Daily Signal than I had the last couple of years in my professional job at what most people consider a fair organization.
Why did we start the Daily Signal? The media landscape is constantly changing, and we want to be on the cutting edge.
They've been willing to let the stories tell themselves and go in whatever direction the stories go.
It's not a question of whether we can drive the media narrative. It's only a question of whether we have the courage to capitalize on the opportunity that's right in front of us. That is what the Daily Signal is.
Thank y'all very much. Thank y'all very, very much. It is great to be here with you. How great is it to be with thousands of fellow conservatives who understand we've got to get our country back on the right track. I want to talk to you about three things today. First, we must repeal every single word of Obamacare. Not a little bit, but all of it. And the reason I start here, I'm not going to spend a lot of time telling you why Obamacare is so bad. We know it was built on broken promises. President Obama told us he was going to cut our premiums $2,500. He didn't do it. He said if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. Not true. He said if you like your health plan, you can keep your health plan. Not true. I don't need to tell you we didn't need government bureaucrats between doctors and their patients. But I am here to tell you something you may not know. And this troubles me greatly. At the same time that Republicans in Washington are about to wave the white flag of surrender on amnesty, they're about to wave the white flag of surrender on repealing Obamacare. And I'm here to tell you, we've got to tell them we won't stand for that. You now have Republicans in Washington, D.C. telling us, well, we can't repeal all of the tax increases, so we'll just keep smaller tax increases. You've got Republicans in Washington telling us you can't get rid of this entitlement program without creating another entitlement program. You've got Republicans in Washington telling us the way to count success is not by reducing costs, but not by empowering patients, but rather by counting how many people have insurance cards, whether they've got meaningful access to affordable care or access to the doctors they want in their networks. Well, I'm here to tell you, I don't know about you, I don't remember during those campaign ads last November, I don't remember them saying, we're just going to repeal the easy parts of Obamacare. They won elections in red states. They won elections in blue states. They won elections in purple states. And one of the most important issues, one of the most important promises they made was that if we gave them the majority, they would repeal and replace every single word of Obamacare. It is time for them to govern the way they campaign and to get rid of Obamacare. We don't need Obamacare light. We don't need a second Democratic Party. We don't need to be liberal. We don't need to be cheaper liberal Democrats. We need to be principled conservative Republicans. I don't know about you, This election wasn't about getting a nicer office for Senator Mitch McConnell. It wasn't about keeping a bigger office for Speaker John Boehner. This election was about taking our country back, and it starts by repealing Obamacare. Now, the second thing we've got to do, and the common theme in all three of these things, is showing the incompetence of Washington, D.C., the second thing we need to do. I'm in federal court right now suing Arne Duncan to make it clear we need to remove Common Core from every classroom in America. Now, why do we care so much about Common Core? You know, we care about education because, first, it's important for us to grow our economy. Studies have shown we could add trillions of dollars to our economy if we would just catch up with other industrialized, competitive countries. It's also we could earn thousands of dollars more. Our children could earn thousands of dollars more if we had great teachers in their classrooms. So it's important to us economically. Secondly, we care about education because it's who we are. We're an aspirational society. We believe the circumstances of your birth don't determine your outcomes as an adult. You shouldn't have to be born to wealthy parents or the right zip code to do great things in our country. But third and most importantly, the reason we care about education, the reason we fund public education in America in the first place, is because we are a self-governing republic. We need to teach the next generation to be critical, independent thinkers. We need to teach them to be able to make informed decisions for themselves and for others when they vote in elections. We also need to train the next generation of leaders. For these and many reasons, first of all, we object to Common Core because the federal government has no right imposing curriculum, imposing content standards in local classrooms when these decisions have always been made by local parents, by teachers, by local leaders. There is a 10th Amendment to the Constitution specifically to prohibit the growth of the federal government into areas like K-12 education. We've seen under President Obama the federal government get more involved, more expensive, more expansive, more intrusive. It must stop. It must stop here. We must repeal Common Core. But make no mistake about it, for the left, this is a pattern. This is the same group that doesn't think you and I are smart enough to exercise our religious liberty rights. They think we're not smart enough to buy our own insurance. They think we're not smart enough to own guns. They think if you live in New York City, you're not smart enough to drink a big gulp. They don't think we're smart enough to pick the best educational options for our children. The reality is that the dollars need to follow the child instead of making the child follow the dollars. We trust parents, not bureaucrats, to make the best decisions for their kids. And whether that's homeschooling or parochial schools or Christian schools or public schools or charter schools or online programs, we trust the parents. We got that done in Louisiana when we tried to do that. The teacher union said this. They said, poor parents don't have a clue when it comes to making choices for their kids. Let me repeat that. Parents don't have a clue when it comes to making choices for their kids. When they're really honest, that's what this Common Core debate is really about. They don't trust us to be smart enough to educate our own children. They think that if the elites in D.C. don't force us, if they don't force us to adopt their standards, their curriculum, their test, we're not smart enough to educate our children. Well, the Founding Fathers got it right. They knew the purpose of the federal government, of a limited federal government, was to secure but not create our God-given rights. Now, the second practical reason we oppose Common Core, and I would invite any parent that is undecided about this, look at the standards, look at the content themselves. I've done that. My little boy, he is now a third grader. He was a second grader last year. If you're undecided about Common Core, look at the math standards. Look at how they're teaching math. This is the new math is what I call it. So my little boy was in the second grade last year, and he's a good student. Gets great grades in math. Brings home his math homework, his math test. Gets all the answers right. Very simple math. 18 plus 4 is 22. That kind of math problems gets it all right. The problem was the second half of the test. There, the teacher said you've got to explain why your answers are right using Common Core methodology. So now, instead of 18 plus 4, it is 20 minus 2 plus 4. And you have to draw circles for the 10s, you've got to draw squares or rectangles for the 1s. It takes about 6 steps to explain your answers. Now, I love my little boy, but he was 7 at the time. He has the attention span of a gnat. So this is what he wrote in response to every single question when the teacher said, explain why your answer is right, anticipating these 6 complicated steps. For every single question, he wrote, just because it is. Teacher sent home the test. She goes, I don't know what to do with this. My wife talked to my son, and then she called me over and said, you need to talk to your son. When he's my son, he's never done anything good, by the way. I sat down. I honestly couldn't chide him. After a couple of minutes, I said, Slade, go outside and play. I can't tell him he did anything wrong. Here's the final thing I'll say about Common Core before I move to my third topic. You think the math standards are bad? You think the ELA standards are bad? What would happen if the federal government were defining, making standards for how we teach American history to our kids? Under this administration, American history would be all about victimization. It wouldn't be about American exceptionalism the way that you and I learned about why this is the greatest country in the history of the world. We've got to stop Common Core, but not just stop it, we've got to stop the next iteration. This isn't the first, it won't be the last time the federal government tries to interfere in our local classrooms. Secondly, let's repeal Common Core. Thirdly, and finally, and this issue is much more important as Obamacare and Common Core are, this issue is much more important than the first 2 issues. As a country, we must fight and win. We must win the war against radical Islamic terrorism. I want to share something with you that brings no joy to my heart. I want to share something with you I don't say as a partisan, as a Republican, as a conservative, or for ideological reasons. I say this with a heavy heart, I genuinely do. President Obama has disqualified himself. He has shown himself incapable of being our commander-in-chief. Now, why do I say that? These barbarians, they are murdering journalists for drawing cartoons they don't like. Beheaded 21 Egyptian Coptic Christians for their beliefs. Burned alive a Jordanian pilot. Killed over 100 school children and teachers in Pakistan. Put it all on social media as a recruiting tool. Murdering, killing, torturing Christians, Muslims, other religious minorities. This is what our president has to say. He says, we are not at war with Islam. Well, certainly we're not at war with Islam, but we are at war with radical Islam. If we have a president who won't even identify the threat that we face, how can we count on them to effectively win and prosecute this war? He's got an attorney general who says we're not even at or in a state of war. How many of you, by the way, are going to be happy when Eric Holder is out of a job? His State Department says that we can't kill our way to victory in this war. How have we ever won any victory in any war other than killing our way to victory? And then finally, his State Department spokesperson, his State Department official says, we're not going to win this war through military force. We're going to win this war through a jobs program and better governance. Folks, we've got a president who won't even name the opponent we face. We don't need a war on international poverty. We need a war on the evil that is radical Islamic terrorism. Now, I gave a speech in London that got a couple of people upset. I got up there and I said that it is up to Muslim leaders and clerics not just to condemn acts of violence generically. Islam has a problem. Individual Muslim leaders and clerics need to say specifically by name, these barbarians, these terrorists, they're not martyrs going to enjoy a reward in the afterlife. These individuals are going to go straight to hell, exactly where they belong. I also said this. I said, here in the West, we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to insist that those that want to come to our societies, to come to our countries, they must assimilate, they must integrate. We used to be the melting pot. Now the politically correct crowd says we're a salad bowl. There is nothing wrong with saying if you want to come to America, you should want to be an American. There's nothing wrong with saying that English is our language. We're going to teach American exceptionalism to our children in civics. Nothing wrong with saying that, by the way, I am tired of hyphenated Americans. We're not Indian Americans or African Americans or Asian Americans. We're all Americans. My parents came to this country over 40 years ago. It was the first time they got on a plane. They couldn't Google Louisiana. They had never visited anybody who had been to Baton Rouge. But they knew in their bones this was a special place that had freedom and opportunity. They came to live the American dream. And my dad, my mom, they used to teach us every day. They'd say, sons, get on your knees and thank God Almighty. You are blessed to be born in the greatest country in the history of the world, the United States of America. Instead of identifying the threat we face, we've got a president who criticizes America and warns us about the threats of the Crusades. Mr. President, I've got a deal for you. I'll keep an eye out for the medieval Christians. Why don't you do your job and win the war against the radical Islamic terrorists that we face today?
Governor?
Let me close with two thoughts. One is this. The one time ever that I want Congress to give the President more than he has asked for. They need to give him the tools to win this war, remove the 3-year time limit, remove the ban on ground troops, tell the political left we want our military leaders to do whatever it takes, not to degrade, contain, or expel, but to hunt down and kill these radical Islamic terrorists. That's how you know you've won a war. And my final thought is this. I've talked about the need to repeal and replace all of Obamacare, the need to get rid of Common Core, the need to win this war. That brings me to the most important point. In 2016, it is not an option for us to win this election. Not because we're Republicans, not because we're conservatives, because we care about our country. This president is bankrupting our country financially, morally, our international standing. We have to win this election. We must win this election. We can win this election. We will win this election so that your children, my children, can say the same prayer my parents taught me. They are blessed to be born in the greatest country in the history of the entire world, the United States of America. God bless y'all and thank y'all very much.
Thank you, Governor. We have a lot of questions from the audience, so if you could take a couple of them for us. You ready for Q&A? Thanks.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
From the audience, what's your response to President Obama's executive order on amnesty?
It needs to be repealed. We elected these Republicans. They told us if we give them the Senate majority, they would stand up to this unconstitutional, this illegal act. Let's be clear about what happened here. The president said he was going to issue this executive order. He delayed it till after the election because he knew it was going to be unpopular. And now he has basically broken the Constitution, broken the law. Look, presidents disagree with Congress all the time. They're not dictators. If they don't like the law, they should change the law. They don't get to just decide what laws they uphold, what laws they ignore. It is time for our Republican leaders in Congress to grow a spine. It is time for them to do the job we elected them to do. Let's force the president to obey the law. No amnesty, and they need to secure the border.
Thank you. Governor, people want to know, when are you going to announce your intentions for 2016?
Well, Sabrina and I, thank you. Sabrina and I are thinking and praying about whether I run. Let me tell you this, and we'll make that decision in the next couple of months, but let me tell you this. Anybody thinking about running for president, what's more important, forget the polls, forget the fundraising, forget the consultants, forget the media. They need to think about what they would do if they were elected president. We need our next president to want to do something, not be somebody. That's why I've spent the last year. I've spent the last year putting out detailed policies on foreign policy, on education reform, on energy independence, on replacing and repealing Obamacare. Our best days are ahead of us as a country, but we have to choose to renew those principles of freedom. This president's done a lot of damage. It's not irreversible. We need principled conservative leadership. We don't need another Republican that comes to Washington and wants to make the New York Times, the Washington Post, the liberal media happy. I want a leader that remembers what they promised us when they asked us to vote for him.
Thank you so much. Let's give another round of applause for Governor Bobby Jindal.
Thank you all very, very much.